Finally, folks, college basketball is back. It is so exciting, and I cannot wait for a couple of there's not really any marquee matchups once again. Still, folks, it's going to be a great day.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, 5 times per week, daily national college hoop show, part, of course, of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Shade.
Hello.
Today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster, and they do it for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Isaac, happy opening day.
Hey, Andy, let's go.
November 6th, the first day of actual college basketball games. No more exhibitions, no more secret scrimmages where we're hunting for box scores in various different places. It is the real deal starting today. And Isaac, in case you don't remember, the first episode ever of the Locked On College Basketball Podcast was on the first Monday in November. I think it was actually the second Monday in November. The first day of the college basketball season was our first show. And guess what our topic was?
What was it, Andy? Remind me, if you will so kindly do so. I'm very old.
We talked about how there weren't very many good games on the first day of the college basketball season. It is unfortunate that we are effectively having the same conversation today. We got one really fantastic matchup between USC and Kansas State, 2 top 25 or borderline top 25 teams. Jerome Tang and the Wildcats, of course, went on that great run last year. USC, of course, adds one of the most premier freshmen in the country in Isaiah Collier, as well as Bronny James, which would have helped make this game even more of a spectacle. Unfortunately, by all accounts, Bronny James is not going to play for a while for USC if he's able to suit up at all. But that's kind of it. And I think that's something we've seen from college basketball in the past, not just last year, but previously. Teams don't really want to schedule marquee games to start the season. They kind of want to ease into the year. The NCAA, nobody really makes them schedule a lot of marquee games. So we end up with first date games that tend to not be all that appealing. Isaac, what do you make of this? And what would maybe you do differently if you had the ability to change scheduling for college basketball?
I think it's a cop-out, Andy, frankly. I will often hear people make some sort of argument in this vein. Like, we can't afford an early season loss. Well, that might be true, but to the correct opponent. Like, if you lose to another high-level opponent, you got 30 more regular season games, Andy. We get 31 of them. It's complete opposite. Like, it's that football mindset that people are bringing to this, and that's not what this is. No. In fact, you're at bigger risk of hurting your resume by playing a lower level opponent should you lose to them. There's literally nothing to gain from a resume standpoint in an opening day, like, complete offset of terms of like, our team's awesome, your team isn't. Yeah. Whereas, like, if you're playing another high level team, you got nothing to lose but experience. Would you rather have the possibility of a quad 1, maybe quad 2 loss, or the possibility of a quad 3, quad 4 loss? I know what I want. And if we're worried about, like, oh, we're starting on Monday, we can't interfere, we can't conflict with Monday Night Football. Okay, move it to Tuesday. Let's have the Champions Classic be the day. Like, I don't know why we can't get this thing figured out. We need a college basketball czar. We'll continue to ring that bell. Andy, looking at this whole thing, there were only 3 games today between KenPom top 100 teams. It's the USC Kansas State game you talked about, Georgia Oregon, which is part of the same event, and then Bradley at UAB, which barely qualifies. Bradley's 99th at KenPom, UAB's 90th. And so there are going to be games that you and I love and care about. Where are the marquee matchups for Johnny Q, random sports fan?
Yeah. Well, folks, we're going to get to some Final Four projections. We're going to get to our national championship predictions, all that stuff coming later in the show. We're going to talk about some waivers as well, but really wanted to start with this conversation, not just because we did it last year, but also because it continues to be a thing we see in college basketball. And I think you nailed it talking about the comparison to football, of the fear of this early season loss kind of derailing your season. And football, they just operate so differently. And if you're a Big 12 team or a Big 10 SEC team, and Big East especially this year, like, you have so many opportunities to pick up quad one games throughout the season. Like, I understand, as somebody who follows Gonzaga very closely, I get why they're a bit different with their non-conference schedule. They play a ton of marquee games, but it's either marquee games or very bad teams, because they can't really risk those losses the same way that a team like Kansas can. If Kansas goes out and loses in the first game of the season, if they lose to Lemoyne or whatever, it's going to be different. But if they lose to
welcome to D1 Lemoyne, by the way,
if they lose to a good caliber opponent, they have so many opportunities to make it up. And I understand the concept of bye games. They're actually very vital for these mid-major schools to exist. And I don't think that they're inherently bad. Again, I'll use Gonzaga because I'm more familiar with their schedule. They have multiple SWAC teams on their schedule. They're paying them to come out to Spokane and lose. And that's fine. I don't disagree with that conceptually, but there needs to be more early in the season. And I think that the fact that there's 2 games between Power 5 opponents on the first day of the game of the year. That's it, just 2. And again, USC, Kansas State's great. Oregon, Georgia, fine. I'm curious how Oregon's freshmen are going to look, but it's not a great game. I'm more
excited about Georgia's recruiting class than I am.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it's just going to be interesting. And we did get a listener submitted question for mailbag that we did on Friday. For those of you who missed it, it was our first ever mailbag episode, hoping to do a lot more of those going forward. But we decided to kind of push this question to today because we knew this was going to be part of our talking point. And I'll read this question here. It comes from JC Fox on Twitter. JC says, to spice up the start of the season, how do you like the idea of a rematch week? He proposed this potentially being in like the last week of November, but we could talk about it being an early season thing as well, where every team from the previous season has to play a rematch versus their first round opponent from last season in the NCAA or in the NIT. Home court goes to whoever won the original game. He says, I think it would be a really fun event and would only offer the slightest chance of a scheduling conflict for playing the same out-of-conference team twice. And I really like this. Isaac, I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on the concept here and maybe the execution, but it's certainly at least something that would spice up that first day if you were to do it early in the season.
And that's what I like about it, Andy. That last thing you said is that it's something. It's an event. It's a moment. It's a spectacle, right? What is the last memory we all have of college basketball? It's the games these teams were playing at the end of the year. There's something to me psychologically about this concept that it's like, oh, the last I remember of Memphis was them playing FAU. Right. Obviously, we couldn't do that because they're in the same conference now, but it's like you think of how tantalizing that first round game was, letting Virginia go back up and try to get some revenge. You think about all the upsets of the first round. And so I like that this specific idea puts us back in the mindset of March Madness. I like that aspect of it a lot. And like you said, I would want to take something like this and put it now. Like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the first couple of days of the season, just to have, even if you've got those bye games later on in the week or whatever, just something to start us off with a splash.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you think about some of these games that you would see, and it's like, some of them are still like Power 5 versus mid-major teams. You get like Baylor versus Santa Barbara would be one, but like Baylor versus Santa Barbara is more interesting than a lot of the other, like, Big 12 team versus low major team. Like, that's a more interesting matchup. Gonzaga versus Grand Canyon. Like, that's a more interesting matchup than you would typically see these teams schedule on their own. So I like the concept. The execution would be very difficult. There's no doubt about that. There's a lot of things that would go into it to make it work. But again, it's something. Is it going to happen? Probably not. Does the NCAA care enough to police what teams are playing early in the season? Evidently, no. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of changes here, unfortunately. But I like this concept, and I like the idea of thinking outside the box to make this first week. And again, there are some very good games happening in the first week of college basketball. Not very many of them are happening on Monday, but there are some great ones, and we're going to talk about that in a future episode. We're going to talk about the rest of this week. Friday is a loaded slate.
I can't wait for Friday, baby.
It's going to be unbelievable, but it still means that today's slate, while we're pumped that college basketball is back. Do not get me wrong. I'm so excited. I'm going to be going to Portland versus Long Beach State. The Pilots are hosting the 49ers in that game. It's going to be a really fun one. I'm very excited to be out at a actual college basketball game. And that's a fun game. It's a fun matchup, especially for me as somebody who loves West Coast mid-major teams. But again, that doesn't have a lot of mass appeal. And it's unfortunate that this game that we love is not doing what it can to have some of that mass appeal very early in the season.
And even the one marquee game doesn't start till 10 Eastern on the East Coast. Like, I know that's great prime time for the West Coast, which makes sense because it's USC and it's K-State, but even bumping it up one earlier hour could maybe help with this thing. Andy, how do you think Purdue and FDU would go in the second time around?
Thank goodness. Yeah, that would be so fun.
Proposal here. You think they could tie down Zach Edey again? I don't know. But anyway, I think it'd be super fun. So, at the end of the day, as you said in the cold open, there still is college basketball, and that is better than nothing. We'll take it. Now, it is going to, regardless of how today is, it's going to be another phenomenal year of college basketball. March right now seems forever away, but Andy, you know it's going to be here before we blink. And with it comes the Final Four, national championship, and all sorts of awards. We've got our picks, plus a couple of those award predictions coming up for you in just a second. Right after I tell you that this episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by Athletic Brewing. Now's the time for your game change of the week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Much like Victor Wembanyama's his ridiculous start to his NBA career, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good, full flavor, and well-crafted, just like a full-strength beer. Seriously, Wemby, he already has 2 double-doubles in his first 5 NBA games. But how about Thursday's performance at Phoenix? Andy, you ready for this? 38 points, 10 boards, 2 assists, a steal, 2 blocks, 3 of 6 from 3, and 5 of 6 from the free throw line. This dude is an alien. Athletic Brewing has over 50 styles of craft, non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, golden, sours, and more. And the brews are fit for all times. You can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity more enjoyable. Like watching a big game, a great opportunity to do it. Maybe have one during K-State USC tonight. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer. Exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company. Fit for all times. All right, Andy. It might be day one, but March is a-coming, and I cannot wait. So let's start by sharing with all our good friends our Final Four picks for this season. Obviously, we have no idea what the bracket's going to look like. All 4 of our teams might wind up in the same region, and then that would be a whole thing. But, Andy, let's start with you. Why don't you lay it on me, your Final Four picks for this year?
Yeah, doing Final Four projections is always fun. It's a lot more challenging this early in the year. I picked 4 teams that I think are all probably going to be relatively high seeds. I don't necessarily think these are the 4 1 seeds that are going to go into the season, but rosters that I think have enough balance, have enough of kind of what you need to win in March: veteran guard experience, well-coached, combination of kind of superstar type talent. And I think these 4 teams kind of fit that bill enough that it's easier for me to see a path for each of these squads into the Final Four without knowing, of course, what that region is going to look like. So give me Duke and Arizona. Those are 2 of the top ones. Those are 2 teams that I think could very reasonably be 1 or 2 seeds in this conversation. Then give me Creighton. They may be a 1 seed as well, to be honest. Creighton hasn't been in that Final Four, but this roster is just unbelievably loaded. And yes, they lose Ryan Nembhard, but Stephen Ashworth's a really capable replacement there, a guy who can space the floor extremely well. Of course, you have Alexander and Shireman and Kalkbrenner back. And then give me Arkansas. Arkansas. And I know we've had some conversations about Arkansas here on the podcast and have heard some comments from people who didn't love that we didn't change our evaluation of them much after they beat Purdue in that exhibition game. But Arkansas is a team that is built for success. Of course, they've had success under Coach Muss. I think the front court is still something I'm going to be watching closely. But if Brazil's healthy, if Mitchell can play well, if Bay Fall can step into a big role as a freshman, the guards are absolutely there and are completely ready to take this team over. And I think there's a real chance that this team may have some struggles early as they put all the pieces together. But this is not a team I would be betting against if they have everything figured out rolling into March.
Because as we just said, early struggles don't matter in college basketball. You just need to be rounding into shape in January, February, and then March. Andy, that's a great call. I love that you said these are teams that you project will be successful in March. And as we talk about all the time, guards and guards with experience in particular really, really help you at that time of year. And Arkansas clearly has that in spades. So I said in our bold predictions last week, I'm just going to keep rolling with it because I don't want to be a flip-flopper, a Johnny come lately. I said I think we're going to have two teams in the Final Four who it's their first time ever making it, one of whom is Creighton. So I'm sticking with it. I'm joining you. Funny enough, that is the one team we are aligned on is Creighton. And then my other team to make their Final Four for the first time is the Tennessee Volunteers. And I love that because I was all out on them last year. I think the offense is going to match the defense this year. I think they're ready. And so I'm rolling with Rick Barnes, and hopefully the folks in Knoxville are happy about that. Andy, thirdly, Purdue. Making that run after what happened last year. I've got them getting there. Matt Painter doing it. And then fourthly, Texas. Folks might not remember, but man, they were just on the cusp of knocking off Miami last year. Probably should have, if we're being honest, and things just fell apart. But it's one of those we often see teams make a run like that and then put it all together and finish the job on that the next season. So I got Texas. And if this is true, there would just be 5 previous Final Fours combined between my 4 schools.
I suspect a little different for me since I have Duke in there. Duke and Arizona have been to a handful of Final Fours there, so not quite as rare.
Arkansas as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is a good point. So I look at national championships since we were talking about Duke and Arizona. That is who I would predict here in this national championship. And give me Duke. I know it's not fun to pick the Blue Devils to win unless you are a Duke fan. But I think that this team has the perfect combination of they have a balanced roster top to bottom. They have, a balanced front court, balanced back court, and then kind of this nice balance of veteran experience as well as younger guys. They obviously have that core group of sophomores returning in Filipowski and Proctor and Mitchell. They have the freshmen coming in and Jared McCain and Sean Stewart and a couple other guys. They have the veteran guy like Jeremy Roach. Like, to me, I just see a team here that is built to succeed in the regular season and is really built to succeed in March, especially if those freshmen kind of take the leap throughout the season that we're used to seeing. Incidentally, I would have Duke over Arizona, a matchup between two young, exciting coaches in John Shire and Tommy Lloyd. I think the Wildcats in Arizona are really well built to succeed in March as well. Caleb Love has been there before. Obviously, Jaden Bradley has had some success in the past as well. Umar Bala, Pella Larson returning back. Keshad Johnson, I think, is a really nice fit as kind of that rugged power forward for this team. I think that those are two teams that are going to be really hard to beat this year. And that's why I have them projected here as potential national championship matchup.
By the way, a rematch from the first week of the season. They are playing on Friday night in Cameron Indoor Stadium. I love these true campus environments. Caleb Love going right back to the North Carolina Tobacco Road area. Going to be a fun matchup. Andy, by the way, I did the math while you were talking. You have 27 combined Final Fours amongst your 3.
A little bit more.
A little bit more than my 5. Andy, my team, and this is for me as a college basketball fan. I want Purdue.
Yeah.
I just think it would be so fun to see both times we've had a 1 seed lose to a 16. They come back the next year and win the national championship. But remember, for Virginia, it was not easy. Think of all those ridiculous calls they had. In particular, knocking off who in the Elite Eight? This Purdue team that we're talking about, the Kihei Clark to Mamadi Diakite to force overtime. Ridiculous. But man, it's Matt Painter's turn. I want to see it happen. Creighton and Tennessee make their first Final Four. Purdue wins their first national championship. And in the process, Andy Patton ends that Big Ten national championship drought going back to 2000.
The storylines are through the roof if your Final Four and national championship projections come through. We're going to be having a field day over here on Locked On College Basketball.
Good for content.
Let's talk National Player of the Year. Did you go with somebody not named Zach Edey, or did you go with Zach Edey? Because it's hard to pick somebody who is not the guy who was so obviously that Player of the Year last year.
Yeah, I 100% went with Zach Edey. I don't need to spend any more time on it. He'll do it again.
Yep, me neither. I somebody else could do it, but to predict somebody else to do it just feels silly at this point. It's his award to lose. It's his award to lose right now. Maybe he won't win it, but man, it's hard to not think that he will.
That's exactly the right way. So with that in mind, let's move on to our choices for Freshman of the Year. Andy, we've talked about how it's not a mind-blowing freshman class, but there is some really good talent in it. Who did you pick for your Freshman of the Year?
Yeah, I went with the guy who is ranked number 1 in the class. Not exactly a shocker here. Again, Edey's the overwhelming favorite for Player of the Year. I think Isaiah Collier is a pretty obvious favorite for Freshman of the Year, but he's got a clear-cut role as the starting point guard at USC for a top 25 team. Bronny James not being in the mix early in the year, it'll hurt him in the sense that he won't have a good teammate next to him, but it puts more on him with the ball in his hands, which I think will lead to more stats, more production. Him and Boogie Ellis combined together in the backcourt is going to be one of the more intriguing things to watch, not just today, but throughout the season, of course, for USC. But give me Collier. He's just too talented to not be the favorite for me right now.
And we'll get to see him in action in that marquee game tonight against Kansas State. Andy, my pick is Justin Edwards of Kentucky. I know there's an argument for a lot of the Wildcats could cancel each other out, but I just think he is that good, that dynamic. The scoring, the playmaking, the shot creation. I know getting Reeves back, I know getting Trey Mitchell back is massive for Coach Cal, but I just think that he is going to be, whether it's from the beginning of the season or not, I think he will ultimately be their number 1 option and will just be such a dude that he will win this award. I think some others that you and I would both want to make folks aware of are Stephon Castle at UConn, Cody Williams at Colorado. I even thought about Jacoby Walter at Baylor, whom maybe it's a hot take, I think could have a bigger impact on Baylor this year than Keontae George did last year.
Ooh, I like that. That is a good hot take. Well, Isaac, the first day of college basketball is going to not only not have that many marquee games, but there's also going to be a lot of players who are going to be missing as well, because we're still waiting on waiver decisions from the NCAA. And we're going to talk about that after a word from today's sponsor, LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business, and you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best and most qualified candidates available. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the right people for your team faster, and they do it for free. It's really, really easy to create a free job post, and then you just add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. From there, simple tools like screening questions can make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and ultimately hire. And that's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Well, Isaac, as we so often do on Mondays in the regular season, it's been a while since we have had a Monday in the regular season. But for those of you who are longtime listeners who've been with us since the start of last season, or at least at some point last season, you know that our segment 3 on Mondays typically have been our weekly 6-packs, where we pick 6 different storylines, 6 different results, injuries, suspensions, whatever it may be, and kind of just lump them all together to kind of get a handful of different stories all covered. We got 362 college teams to cover, so it's not easy to get to everything. But Isaac, we wanted to do a 6-pack here to talk about some of these waiver decisions and various other things, but there's just too many. There's too many things. It is November 6th. It is the start of the college basketball season, and there are a handful of players where either they have not been given a decision from the NCAA, they have been given a decision and have not announced said decision to the public. Maybe there's still an appeal process, but I feel for fans at Arizona State who don't know if Adam Miller's going to play, fans at Wake Forest who don't know if Efton Reed's going to play, fans at Ole Miss who don't know if Musa Cisse or Brandon Murray are going to play. Like there are, and that's just a handful of the situations that are still open, still kind of happening right now. And we've seen some frustrating ones. We've seen Jalen Tyson get his waiver denied going to Cal, despite everything that happened to him at Texas Tech last year. And it's been frustrating to follow this situation for the lack of timeliness that we have seen on some of these announcements. I mean, we find out DeAndre Williams at Memphis gets his waiver denied just on Friday, the 27-year-old. We were not shocked that he didn't get his waiver approved, but it took until then for Memphis to know whether their starting center was going to be playing this year. Like, it's another one of those things where the NCAA may have the right idea conceptually. They may be trying to do the right thing, but the execution, there's no other way to say it, has been pretty horrendous this offseason.
It had, like, Andy, you talked about that Jalen Tyson one. That really gets to me. Like, the fact that Mark Adams, like, anytime your coach is gone, and there's a couple of these on this list that is that kind of situation. If the coach is gone, a player should be able to leave without having to sit out. I mean, that should just be part of the rule. But, like, with Jalen Tyson, it's like Mark Adams is fired. He gets penalized by the NCAA for not immediately entering the transfer portal. Like, that's ultimately their reasoning for not approving it. And he's like, the AD asked me to stay and wait to see how I feel about the new coaching staff. Right. I'm just trying to do the right thing here. And you're punishing me for that by perception. Like that's the kind of thing that infuriates me. It's like, if it makes sense within your waiver plans and the way you handle it, to not grant it, cool. But if we're not doing it for nonsensical reasons, that is ridiculous, because it's not just a name on a sheet. It is a young man with hopes and dreams and a family and, all of these things.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I was going to say another one that kind of came up in a similar situation is Ziz Bendago going over to Cincinnati from Utah Valley. And it's like, there wasn't as much consternation with his relationship with the coach at Utah Valley. That's the huge part of this Jalen Tyson story, which makes it far more aggravating. But Bendago, like Utah Valley, his coach leaves. Mark Madsen goes to Cal, and Bendago's expected to stay there. Just, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me that he wouldn't be allowed to go. He didn't even follow his coach. He went to Cincinnati, went to a different school. And to me, I don't understand, like, outside of procedural and basic rules, I don't understand the actual argument for not letting Bendago or Jalen Tyson play at their new schools. They left because their coaches weren't there anymore. And to me, it just feels very cut and dry. And yet the NCAA is muddying it up, as they frankly so often do.
So that's the one side of it, is the denial of waivers that probably shouldn't. There are certain, under the new guidelines, I get that they're trying to be more firm on it. Do you? That's great. But let's not deny the wrong ones. Right. That's where we're at. Now, there's the other side of it that we're experiencing here on day one, where, as you already said, it's the fans that are really hurt, not knowing the result of some of these. And I really appreciate your point, Andy, about, like, some of these just might not be public yet, and that's fine. Whatever, cool. You got to do what you're doing. But on these ones where we're waiting and they've heard nothing, like that is inappropriate. Like, I don't know, like, NCAA, do you just not have enough personnel? Because I'm happy to come help. Like, what do you need to make this work? Why is it taking so long?
And if appeals are coming, like if that the players are going to appeal, that the coaching staff's going to appeal, which you do, like, why, like, you got to get this done sooner. If they don't have the ability to get this stuff done sooner, then I'm not sure what we're doing at all. Like, what is the point of waiting until the last week in October to deny a waiver, knowing that player is going to appeal, and now they're just going to continue to be in limbo going into the season? Like, once again, like, big picture, like, just getting out of the weeds of the whole thing. Like, at the end of the day, the NCAA, the coaches, the athletic directors, everybody's working together to make the best product possible. So, there's financial motivation to get more eyes on the games TV wise, which is not, my specific favorite thing that is motivating, but it is what matters. More people watching the sport, more people engaging with the sport, more people buying concessions, buying jerseys, watching the games on TV, all that stuff. And at the end of the day, these decisions coming late, coming arbitrarily, like, again, some of them are fine. Some of the decisions that are being made are understandable. They're denying waivers to players who probably should have their waivers denied. There is an element of this that is okay, but the execution is poor, and it is ultimately hurting the sport. goes all the way back to our first conversation to start the show of like not having these marquee games on day one. It's something that just hurts the product. Yeah. We love college basketball so much. And we know that everybody out there listening, if you're listening to a college basketball podcast on day one, you love it too. And you're hyped and you're ready for this season to start. And at the end of the day, these decisions being made by the NCAA and these decisions to not play these marquee games are hurting the sport. And it's frustrating. And there's just not really any other way to look at it. Again, whether decisions are right or wrong is, a conversation that is slightly irrelevant. It's not entirely irrelevant, but it's a little irrelevant to me in the sense that the issue is that the execution is really poor.
Yeah. It's almost like you owe it. Like I try to answer every email that's sent to me within 24 hours. And if I can't, or it's going to take me a couple of days, I'll send a different email that says, hey, I got your email. I'll respond to it by Friday. Like that's the thing. If the NCAA is not going to be able to give you an answer by the beginning of the season, at the very least, give me a deadline. Like, hey, I'm so sorry that you haven't heard on this by the beginning of the season. We'll let you know by November 15th, whatever it is. Just something to do the right thing and be fair to these young men and all the young men and young women across all NCAA sports. Andy, all right, we've grumbled. We're thrilled that it's day one. Let's watch some basketball. First game of the day, tipping off at 11 a.m. between Ooey Pooey, IUPUI, and a D2 school. Forgive me to them because forgive me for not remembering your name. But that's tipping off at 11 a.m. Eastern. Hey, folks, thanks so much for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen or watch of the day. If you would, join our Discord. Come on in. Links in the show notes. We're having great conversation all the time. Please make sure to subscribe, smash that like button, leave comments on your thoughts on all of this that we're talking about today. As always, and as we answered on Friday, apologies to the lawyer family. Go Wildcats, and until tomorrow, peace.